This episode of Southeast Iowa Today is brought to you by Griner Auto Body of Washington, Iowa. Using state-of-the-art techniques and decades of experience to get your car back on the road after an accident. Car Doctor of Washington, Iowa. No matter who Frankensteined it, they can fix it, clean it, and customize it. McDonald Boneyard of Keota, Iowa. For all your farm equipment and auto recycling needs. Hinshaw Trailer Sales of Richland, Iowa. You need a trailer? They've got your trailer, and they can fix what they sell and don't in their full-time repair shop. Girling Repair of Winfield, Iowa. If your mower is dead, call Fred, your Husqvarna, Aaron's, and Gravely dealer. Fred also fixes and sells snowblowers. B&B Propane and the family of jet stops. Dutch Market and Coffee Talk of Washington, Iowa. Dutch Market can handle all of your grocery needs, and they even have a conference room you can use for free. Coffee Talk's drive-thru is open and ready to serve you coffee, energy drinks, sandwiches, baked goods, and ice cream. They all present the award-winning Southeast Iowa Today. Here's the author of Christie's Journey, The Beat Goes On, and your host, John Bain.
Thank you, Cody Roy, and your golden pipes. Cody Roy's from NewEnglandDukes.com, and thank you for your wonderful introduction. This guy's with me. You know what that means, right, Bob?
Yes, we're on the road.
We're day tripping with Bob DeWitt. And where are we at today, Bob?
Maquoketa, Iowa, at the Jackson County Historical Society Museum, if I'm saying that right.
You're pretty darn close. And we're going to, once again, this is a part 2 of a 3-part episode. She's been on before, and she's back again on this episode, Bonnie Mitchell. So let's get right to it.
Let's go.
Play. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, it's loud. All right, come on. Well, maybe it's not going to, maybe the bellows are not going to work. Let's see if we can get it going. It's really awesome once it gets going.
They're just tickling the ivories a little bit right now.
Okay, so it should be ready here. I think the bellows are not, because it's usually real peppy and fast. Need a little more humidity. Oh, that's too bad, because it's awesome.
That's still pretty cool, because you can see on the paper.
Yeah, are the words. I should have come back and tried it. I didn't even think about it.
This is wonderful, though.
Okay, so
it's getting better as it goes.
So let's show what it looks like under there.
Oh, look at that.
Okay, I see that these are stuck. It's just not. That's too bad.
That's still very impressive, Bonnie.
But because the bellows are dry, they won't do their thing.
Well, it's winter time.
So
we're recording this on
back.
March 7th, 2025.
Right. So you have to come back. Now I can't find the. There's a lever right there that's supposed to turn it on. Okay. So this player piano is wonderful when it's when the bellows are all bellows are. It's wonderful. Yeah. So we got a call from a lady in Lincoln, Nebraska, and she was a music teacher at a big music store downtown, old Lincoln, Nebraska. She had 3 player pianos, and she was having to sell them, but she would give this one to us because we were the Jackson County Historical Society, and it was made in Bellevue. And so we had to go get it. So we went and got it, and we put it in the back of a pickup, and we tied it all down with moving blankets and everything. Mm-hmm. We had to stop every 10 minutes because the wind kept getting, Finally, we got duct tape, and we rolled it, and we finally got it here. But the neat thing is, it was made out in probably 1914 out of quarter sawn oak. And we can tell what it looked like at one time because somebody lacquered it black, but they missed a couple places. So this is what it would have looked like. And again, someday it does play beautifully when it plays. But someday maybe we can have it restored to the way it should have been. Interesting thing about this piano is on their very best day, they sold 333 player pianos in one day.
Wow.
In Bellevue, Iowa. There was a railroad spur that went right behind the factory. The Mississippi was right across. And so back in the day, some got shipped out on steamboats and things like that. But they had quite a wonderful industry, a piano industry.
I wonder how many different songs were available. Because you're basically, here's your CD, folks.
Right, you bet. You just take that roll off, and around the corner, up on the top, there are boxes and boxes and boxes of. And you can still buy piano rolls today.
Really?
But the interesting thing is you know how cartoons back in the day, there was just action all over the screen, and you watch a cartoon today and somebody's mouth moves and maybe their eyes move and that's all there is?
Yeah.
These are the good ones that just have all kinds of things going on with the music. The ones you buy today are kind of like today's cartoons. But they're around the corner. We have boxes and boxes of them.
Wow. Are they back over here?
Yep, right on the top shelf. Just as you go around the corner, up on the top shelf, I believe.
Oh, boy, look at that.
So every time you want a different song, you have to put a different piano roll on.
Yeah.
But
you know, I was thinking about this when it was playing. I was like, you too can be Liberace.
That's right. So this one is Turkey in the Straw, and it's really lively. And so we get groups of kids in here, and they're doing the chicken dance and the whole thing. So it's fun. But I'm sorry it wouldn't play for you today.
And that is from, how old is that?
1914.
1914.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's been just kind of all over the country, and there it is. But on a good day, it plays beautifully. It does.
It's doing good for 1914.
Yeah. So this is the area that our canon will be in one day soon.
Okay.
Back here, well, maybe we'll start this way.
Well, I got to look at the TV.
Right. This is a good place to stop.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Can you tell the folks to like, follow, and subscribe, and that it's free?
They don't know to like, follow, and subscribe, or they don't know it's free. We've been saying this for a long time.
Thanks, Bob. So, Bonnie, what do we have going on up here?
Well, right above us is our friend the elk. And back in the day, as we like to say, there were herds of thousands of elk that traveled through this country. That's when the Indians were here and that sort of thing. There hasn't been an elk in Jackson County for quite a long time. Probably 150 years, maybe.
We've got a lot of deer, though.
There are a lot of deer. But what we have here is just all of the things that you see here are animals that lived in Jackson County at one time, or a lot of them are still here today. And we're very proud of the fact that we have bald eagles, because it's very hard for museums to have bald eagles these days.
Oh, yeah.
We have an adult bald eagle. And though most people don't realize it, this is a teenager right here.
That's a teenager.
It's a teenager. And as it reaches adulthood, it'll shed its feathers and it'll have the white hood.
Okay.
As it gets older.
Wow.
So as you know, we've got lots of pheasants here. We've got, still today, though they were wiped out at one time. We had such a hard winter, so many blizzards, probably in 1886, that it just decimated the whole pheasant population.
And then you had a coyote that liked to eat them too.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
there was so much snow that they couldn't get to food, and they couldn't run in the snow, and so they couldn't get away. They were captured. We have our friend the bear here. This is a black bear. The name Maquoketa comes from the Indian saying there are bears, and on the banks of the Maquoketa River, there were black bears everywhere. So we had lots and lots of black bears at the time that the Indians were here.
So the reason we don't have as many black bears now is
people moved in, the crops changed, they cut down the forest, they planted the corn and the soybeans, and
wiped out their habitat.
Right. So they just moved further north.
Okay.
Every once in a while, a renegade comes back, which we're happy to see.
Yeah.
We have, of course, there were lots and lots of wild turkeys. This was just a veritable.
Well, speaking of wild turkey, it looks like you got a still.
Yes, we do. That still came from a farmhouse in Bellevue. It has a fascinating story.
So we got moonshiners in Jackson County.
But the thing for me is I know that my grandfather made that still.
Really?
And the reason I know it is because he used a certain kind of weld when he made things that other people didn't use.
So
he made that still at one time.
Did his product taste better?
I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would. I do remember when I was just little, he and my father were in business together, plumbing and heating business, and my dad made him stop making stills.
Really?
Because he was so afraid that the government would come and take their whole business. So he was not allowed to make stills anymore.
So it was a little safer to be in the plain old plumbing business than this sort of plumbing.
Yeah, you don't make stills anymore, but he I understand made a lot of them.
That's some cool family history.
It is. This is a really, including the coat, this is a really neat display. There was a man over in the Sebula area by the name of Harold Giddings, and he was very interested in birds. He came here very early in the settling of our county. 1885, I see there, but he was here before then, I know. Mm-hmm. And he started tracking the migration of birds. Of course, in Sebula, the backwaters of the Mississippi, all of the migrating birds came through that way and would stop there for a while. Yeah. Well, he's the first person known to record the different birds that were coming through. And not so much now, but when I first came here, we had people from the University of Iowa and people come to look at his logs of the migration of the birds because they were studying.
What a service he did.
He did. And all of these little birds, he was a taxidermist, and so all of these little birds he put in these cases. So when we have school children that come through, they want to know, what happened to these birds? How did they die? Yeah. And we don't tell them that he shot them to do his collection. But Ed Luckish, and we talked about our world-class scientist, Matt Luckish. This was his father. He had a collection of bird eggs that were collected from around Jackson County. And you see how tiny some of these are in comparison to the swan egg that is up above there.
Wow.
And
that'd make a couple omelets.
Absolutely. Interesting thing about the swans that we had in Jackson County, of course, they were natives here, but during the Great Depression, when food was so hard to get, the local town boys, the local farm boys, they would gather all of the swan eggs and they would put them on the train and send them into Chicago. And they were served at some of the famous restaurants and things like that.
Wow.
But yeah, it was pretty interesting.
I wonder how much they paid them per egg.
Yeah, I don't know that. And but then pretty soon we didn't have swans here anymore because it was just so widespread.
Wow.
So these are some of the river things, the river animals, the ducks and the fish that were in the Mississippi.
Wow.
Another one of my little stories is this muskie down here. My son actually caught that.
Really?
And then he couldn't take it home because the fins would get broken or whatever. And so I wanted to put it in here. And they said to me, you can't put that in there because muskies weren't in Jackson County. But in our 1879 history book, it says that the Maquoketa River was teeming with a muskie, and then it named some other fish.
Well,
there he is.
I'd say it belongs there.
There he is. You bet.
Wow.
So this is just our little wildlife area that shows what was here. This is, of course, around Sebula with the migrating birds and whatever.
We still have pelicans today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this loon, where is the loon? I don't know. We have a loon that's very rare that they've never.
Sorry, Bob. I had to put you on camera when you asked where the loon was.
But these are all the great fish that are in our waters.
That is incredible. So, well, let's wrap up this segment and then go check out other parts.
Absolutely. Okay.
Hey, Bob, can you do me a favor?
Sure. If you're enjoying this, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe.
It's free, and we appreciate you. Bonnie, we're in a special section right now.
We are. This is near and dear to my heart, this section. We had our first annual Civil War reenactment last fall called Muster on the Maquoketa, because we wanted people to know that, first of all, a lot of people don't even think Iowa had a part in the Civil War, let alone Jackson County. But we have great Civil War history in this part of Iowa and in Jackson County. And so this is kind of more of our story right here.
Okay.
Most of the men from this area served in the 9th Iowa and particularly in Company A. And that's their battle flag, and this is some of their history. Company A was formed.
This was their battle flag here?
Okay. The 9th Iowa's battle flag. So Company A, there were 10 companies in the 9th Iowa. Company A was formed by this man over here, Captain Drips. And he was editor of the Excelsior newspaper at the time the Civil War broke out, and he resigned his newspaper activities. And he is the one that raised the unit from Maquoketa.
And he had to be young.
Yep, he was young. And he was just outstanding and a patriot. Mm-hmm. And his second in command, though we don't have a picture of him, was Kelsey.
Okay.
And he was Lieutenant Farilla Kelsey.
Is this his sword?
That is his sword. And the sword is the wonderful story. We know that in like 1861, the people of Maquoketa bought 2 swords. And if you can see on the top of the sword right there, mm-hmm. on the top of the case, you can see where it's engraved. And I don't know if you'll be able to pick that up.
I'm going to zoom in on it.
Okay, and here's a photograph of it also.
Well, look. Oh, yeah, I'm picking that up really good.
Oh, good.
What's it say on it?
Donated by the people of Maquoketa, Iowa. And their names are engraved on it. And there were 2 swords, one for Kelsey and one for Drips.
Nice.
Well, Kelsey's sword after the war, they both died in the mm-hmm. war. Captain Drips was our hero. The first big battle that Company A fought was the Battle of Pea Ridge in Arkansas, which is a big turning point in the war. He died on the battlefield that day outside of the inn with our sword in his hand. He fell in battle. So Lieutenant Kelsey stepped up to take his place. Well, after the war was over, both swords were returned to the widows. And then both swords were presented in a ceremony to the auxiliary unit from here of the Civil War. And then they just kind of disappeared. We don't know what happened to them. His sword has ended up in a museum on the battlefield at Pea Ridge.
Oh,
and
really?
It can be seen there today, and his whole story of how bravely they fought. They lost just dozens and dozens of people, but it was a turning point of the war because it kept Missouri on the Union side. And had we lost that battle, the South would have gained control of the Mississippi going down, and it would have been really
probably would have changed the course of the war.
It would have. So these people are really brave and dear
heroes.
Yes. About 2 years ago now, we never knew what happened to the Kelsey sword. About 2 years ago, I got a phone call from a man in Salt Lake City. And he said he had talked to me before because we have a story about the rifles from the Battle of Wounded Knee, which is a whole nother story. But that's how I knew him. And he remembered, not my name, but he remembered Maquoketa because that's a very unusual name. Mm-hmm. Well, he was at a gun show in Las Vegas at a huge convention center with a bunch of his friends. And he was looking at this Civil War exhibit with all these artifacts for sale. And he saw this sword and read the engraving and he said, Maquoketa, I know Maquoketa. So he waited until he got back to Salt Lake City and they called me. And he said, do you know anything about this sword? And of course I did.
Yeah.
And so that man went all the way back to Las Vegas, looked up the gun show was still going on. I guess it was several days later. And he bought that sword for us. Well, we reimbursed him, but he bought the sword for us. He shipped it to us and he was an expert. He told us many things about the sword, how it had evidently been in a very safe place. He told us that it had been mended, very professionally mended, and showed us where the mend was on the scabbard. It's a leather scabbard. And anyway, he returned the whole. So it was a wonderful thing to us after all these years to have this sword come back to us. And so this whole story, came to light then. This man is really interesting. He was James Sutton, better known as Alabama Jim. He was the last remaining Civil War veteran to be alive in Jackson County. But he's interesting because he fought for both the North and the South. And that happened because as like 14, 15-year-old living in the South, he was living in an area on a plantation, near a plantation, but in an area where there were people who did not believe in slavery. And so he was raised not to, but he was conscripted into the Southern Army. He fought for a long time, and then he got 4 or 5 of his friends, and they escaped one night.
Wow.
They were captured by the Union soldiers and put into a prison, but then he made his case, and of course he was allowed out because he then became a Union soldier. Well, at the end of the war, he was a man without a country, right? He didn't have anywhere to go. So he came back, he had made some friends, and he came back to Jackson County with some of his friends.
Huh.
And he owned a farm west of town and raised a large family, and he has a lot of relatives here today. But they're just awesome stories about Alabama Jim Sutton.
That's pretty
cool.
So
he's part of our history. And you ask about the Civil War drum.
Yes.
Right here. When the Maquoketa caves were discovered, they were discovered by the Scott family. And David Scott was the son. And at the age of, I think, 14, maybe, he became a drummer boy. And that's the drum that he carried in the Civil War. And it was eventually returned to the family. And they had it kind of restored and put in that case for us. And so it's been here ever since. And the monument here is also Civil War. It's from the city of Miles. And you can see our Captain Kelsey up at the top. He was from Miles. He was the man who owned the sword way at the top. He was a tinsmith in Sebula when he left to fight for the Civil War.
Wow.
So,
you know, and it's shaped like the Washington Monument.
It is, isn't it? It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So it has the names of all the people from that area that served in the Civil War. And there were so many. And it's just sad that people today don't realize the important part that Jackson County played in the Civil War.
Yeah, well, hopefully they'll watch this and
they'll know more.
Know more.
Yeah. So this is our original military display, and there are Civil War things here. We had a lot of other Civil War people. Some cannonballs down there. We're especially proud of. So you see this stand of grapes right there. Well, we're told at least that there are very many of those that remained very few of those that remained intact, because when they were shot, they burst and went all different directions. So we're very proud to have that Civil War and things that have been given to us.
That's really something.
Isn't that neat?
Then
as we move down this way, we move into the Spanish-American War, and we have a wonderful Spanish-American War cannon that's been restored that we're going to be putting over in that area.
Okay.
But we had several prominent people that served in the Spanish-American War that came just after the Civil War, 1893, I think. And then we move into World War I. And, everyone from this area went to Camp Dodge near Des Moines for their training. And we had a very interesting young man that also graduated from high school here who was a cartoonist. Really? And he was a battlefield cartoonist, but he did not want to go report on the war as a news person or a cartoonist. So he actually joined the Army, so he would be in the midst of the fighting.
He saw it all then.
He did, and he died in the killing fields over there. And so, but he had probably wasn't supposed to, but he had sent back a lot of his artwork and things like that, and his letters, and his family had kept everything. Wow. And so now there's a book about him, written first person about him. And so he was just a wonderful.
And that's examples of his artwork?
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm told that there's only one actual military museum in Iowa, and that's the Gold Star Museum that is at Camp Dodge. It's wonderful, and his whole story is told there. And that's where his artifacts went, and they curated all that. And then we have the Second World War, but we saw Charlie Nigg a little bit ago, right, in his wheelbarrow and how he walked across the country. Well, this is in memory of his family. They were, when someone died in the First World War, the Second World War, there was always a banner that hung in the window, and it had stars, and there was a blue star for soldiers who came home, and then gold stars to represent those who didn't come home. And the Nigg family lost two boys in the wars, and one of them was Frank, and he died on the Cyclops that sunk. And we're told that his ship was sunk in the Bermuda Triangle when there was, all of the stories about strange things happening in the Bermuda Triangle, etc. Mm-hmm. We know that it was carrying gold bars from San Francisco area, coming through the Panama Canal and up, so that they would have money to fight the war. And so the thought was that the Germans sunk, with their submarines, sunk this. But the Germans have forever insisted, they would have been proud to have claimed that, but they forever insisted that they didn't. But
so that means they couldn't get the gold.
Yeah.
Or they did get the gold.
They did not get the gold. So anyway, this is just thanks for and their little the little arithmetic book is right here that we were talking about.
Oh, okay.
That Charlie wrote this little book, and it was just arithmetic in such a simplified form that it was thought to be a better way to teach mathematics than was being taught in the schools today. Wow. So, and then I heard Bob mention our scale here. It's pretty interesting. It was at the Rock Island Arsenal at one time.
Okay.
And we're told that it was way before then. It was used in land offices, and they weighed gold dust because it weighs down to the very minute.
Wow.
And they would weigh gold nuggets and gold dust as people came back from the gold rush. It then went to the Rock Island Arsenal, and we know that there it was used to determine the proper amount of gunpowder to put in, to put in gun shells and, things like that. So it was used at the Rock Island Arsenal for a long time before it came to us. So we're excited to be able to have that here, and then we'll put our cannon over here, and we'll have the whole story, because the Arsenal was such an important place to all of us.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, hey, let's wrap up this segment.
All right.
And we'll check out a little bit more.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Bonnie, what are we looking at now?
Wow, this is a pretty good exhibit of the Lucke Brothers shoe store and boot store that was in Bellevue, Iowa. And it was right on Front Street. They called it Front Street back then. So right across the street was the Mississippi. So we have some pretty interesting artifacts here. Pretty much everything that they had in their shop. And there's just some interesting stories. The owner was in the oval frame up there.
Okay.
That was Joseph Lucke. He came to this country and he started this business, which ended up in 2001 at least, was the longest running family business in the state of Iowa. Wow. So it existed for a very, very long time. Some of the artifacts that we got from them is, for instance, this sign, Joseph Lucke Bootmaker, and it hung outside along the Mississippi in the weather for years and years and years.
Wow. So
we had to get a grant from Dubuque Racing Association to have it all restored. It's called a folk art trade sign.
Okay.
They're highly collectible. And of course, we don't care what our artifacts are worth, because we only look at the history of things, not the financial things. But we know that both this and the boot, which is also a folk art trade sign, are worth over $10,000 a piece. So this is made like an actual man's boot by Joseph Lucke, Joseph Lucke, to advertise his business. And it hung outside its store. It's all made with wooden pegs. Now down below we have his wooden case that he kept all his different sizes of wooden pins in.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't use nails in boots and things. Back then they used wooden pegs and glues.
One of the questions that I had when you were first talking about it, this thing hung outdoors.
It did.
And we can see from the reflection the bottom of it. And my question was, did it have holes in the bottom of it? Because if it rained or snowed or anything, how would...
It did not. It did not. So back in the day, I understand that they would put these little these little metal tacks in the bottom so the soles didn't wear out as fast. And they would sometimes put pretty intricate patterns. So we put a mirror there so some people could see it, but that was the pattern of his boot. When we got this, you're right, it had been outside for so long.
I would just think it would fill up with water over time.
Well, it does have a top. It does have a cover on
closed.
the top. It is closed. But still, you would think.
Yeah, that's how... I didn't look at the back, and I mean, it looks so much like a boot, I just figured somebody's big foot would go in there.
When we got it, the sole had separated like this, and all of the wooden pegs could be seen. It looked like a shark with thousands of pegs
little
and teeth.
Yeah.
So we had to have a lot of restoration work done for this, and the Dubuque Racing Association helped us with this too. So we're really happy. But if you come into the shop, this also came from the shop, and though they replaced the shelves, I think. It was a a secretary kind of desk that they
Sure.
used for their things. These are some of the actual tools and equipment that he used back in the day to make the boots, because they made everything from absolute scratch. This was his desk, and the desk is kind of interesting in that we're told that back in the day, Joseph Lucke would sit here in his chair, and right here in this chair, we call this the Ulysses S. Grant chair. Ulysses S. Grant was a great friend of Joseph Lucke. It was at the time of his life, between his Army service, and then he got out of the Army for a little while. Then the Civil War came along, and he reenlisted and became the general, as you know.
Right.
But during that time, he worked for his family's tannery business that was in Galena.
Okay.
And so he was a huge, big, strong guy, and he could carry the hides and things like that. So he's very valuable in that business. He was not a very successful businessman on his own, as we know. But he would take little boats, and he would bring his hides across the river, and he'd go up and down the side of the river selling his hides to all the little bootmakers and shoemakers along the way. So that's how they got connected, and they formed this friendship. And he would come and he would sit here with his feet up on the desk and smoke his famous cigars, and they would have these deep, deep discussions. The other time that Ulysses S. Grant came to Maquoketa often, well, when he came to Maquoketa to sell to the shoemakers here, when he came to Maquoketa, this was in Bellevue.
Right.
He came to Maquoketa. He became great friends with William Swigert, who, as we said, started the newspaper in 1854. And they would go to the Decker Hotel that is still on Main Street in Maquoketa, and they would meet there, and they would smoke their cigars and have their whiskey and talk about politics and things like that. And at one time, he got a little rowdy, I think, and so he was escorted out of the hotel. And so that's another story. But Grant did spend quite a lot of time here. He never came back to Maquoketa after the war.
Wow.
But he spent a lot of time here.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I want to wrap up this episode because I know we've got so much more, and I want to be able to put these in segments that people can watch.
Okay.
And
there's, just before you, there's some of the old shoes that were made by the store. All right.
And they made it for all ages and sizes.
Ages. And they always had this old cash register that still works, this brass cash register.
That's quite a treasure.
And we have a lot of other artifacts that just come and we'll show you all of them.
All right. Thanks, Bonnie. Thank you again to Bonnie Mitchell. This has been incredible. Bob, great job on the day tripping.
She's quite a historian, isn't she?
She's a walking encyclopedia, that's for sure. And I need to thank you for watching, and I've got to thank our sponsors. Griner Auto Body, Car Doctor, McDonald Boneyard, Hinshaw Trailer Cells, Gerling Repair, B&B Propane, and the family of Jet Stops, the Dutch Market, and Coffee Talk. He's Bob DeWitt. I'm John Bain. Stay friendly, Southeast Iowa.